If you could stand on the banks of a wide, muddy river 5,000 years ago and watch the sun rise over the first city on Earth, you might not realize you were witnessing the beginning of recorded history. There would be no skyscrapers, no engines, no neon lights, just reeds swaying in the breeze, oxen pulling wooden plows, and a cluster of sun-baked brick buildings rising improbably from the flat plains of southern Mesopotamia. Yet in that fragile settlement, in the shadow of a stepped temple called a ziggurat, humanity quietly crossed a threshold. For the first time, people were not just surviving, they were building civilizations that would outlive them, shape the world, and leave behind stories etched in clay. Long before the first words were pressed into wet tablets, human beings had already been on a journey stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Our story begins not with kings or pyramids, but with small bands of hunter-gatherers roaming the savannas of Africa. Around 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens learned to cooperate, to share food, and to communicate in increasingly complex ways. They crafted stone tools, controlled fire, and eventually migrated out of Africa, following herds and coastlines into the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and beyond. For most of human existence, life was mobile and precarious. Survival depended on understanding the rhythms of nature, the migration of animals, the seasonal ripening of plants, the behavior of rivers. But around 10,000 BCE, something extraordinary happened in several places at once. In the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped region stretching from the eastern Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, people began to domesticate plants and animals. Wheat and barley replaced wild grasses. Goats and sheep replaced hunted game. The so-called Neolithic Revolution was less a sudden explosion than a slow transformation, but its consequences were profound. Farming allowed populations to grow. Permanent settlements formed. Property, hierarchy, and organized religion followed close behind. By 3500 BCE, in the southern reaches of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates, villages had grown into cities like Uruk and Ur. These were not random clusters of huts, they were organized communities with walls, markets, and monumental temples. At the center of Uruk stood the Eanna precinct, dedicated to the goddess Inanna. Priests managed grain storage and trade. Artisans specialized in pottery and metalwork, and somewhere in the administrative chaos of managing surplus crops and taxes, a revolutionary idea emerged: writing. The earliest known writing system, cuneiform, began as simple pictographs pressed into clay with a reed stylus. At first, it recorded inventories, how many sheep, how many jars of oil. But over centuries, it evolved into a flexible script capable of poetry, law, and myth. With writing came memory that could outlast a human lifetime. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature, tells the story of a king of Uruk who seeks immortality. His journey, filled with friendship, loss, and a great flood, echoes themes that would reappear in later religious traditions, including the Hebrew Bible. Mesopotamia was a land of opportunity and danger. The rivers that nourished crops could also flood unpredictably. There were no natural barriers against invasion. City-states rose and fell in rapid succession. Around 2334 BCE, a ruler named Sargon of Akkad forged one of the world's first empires by conquering rival cities and placing loyal governors in charge. His empire stretched across much of Mesopotamia, demonstrating that political power could extend beyond a single city. Centuries later, Babylon rose to prominence under King Hammurabi. His most enduring legacy was not conquest, but law. The Code of Hammurabi, carved into a basalt stele around 1754 BCE, laid out nearly 300 laws covering theft, marriage, contracts, and punishment. An eye for an eye became shorthand for a system that aimed at order through strict retribution. The code was far from equal. Punishments varied by social class, but it marked a milestone in the development of written legal systems.
While Mesopotamia experimented with cities and laws, another civilization flourished along the Nile. Egypt's predictable flooding cycle created fertile land and relative stability. Around 3100 BCE, King Narmer unified Upper and Lower Egypt, setting the stage for a civilization that would endure for millennia. The Egyptians believed their pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a god on earth, responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic balance of order and justice. The Old Kingdom is often called the Age of the Pyramids, and for good reason. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, remains one of the 7 wonders of the world of ancient times. Contrary to popular myth, it was not built by slaves, but by a labor force of skilled workers who rotated in and out of service. These monumental tombs were expressions of a deeply held belief in the afterlife. Egyptian civilization was not static. It experienced periods of fragmentation and foreign rule, including invasions by the Hyksos, who introduced horse-drawn chariots. During the New Kingdom, pharaohs like Hatshepsut expanded trade networks, while Akhenaten attempted a radical religious reform by promoting worship of a single deity, Aten. His experiment in monotheism was short-lived, reversed after his death, yet it hints at the dynamic and sometimes controversial nature of ancient religious life.
Beyond Mesopotamia and Egypt, other civilizations emerged. Along the Indus River, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro boasted sophisticated urban planning around 2600 BCE. Streets were laid out in grids, homes had drainage systems, yet their script remains undeciphered, and much about their society is still a mystery. The civilization declined around 1900 BCE, possibly due to climate change or shifting river patterns, a reminder that even advanced societies are vulnerable to environmental forces. In East Asia, the Shang dynasty ruled parts of northern China around 1600 BCE. They left behind oracle bones, turtle shells, and animal bones inscribed with early Chinese characters used for divination. These inscriptions provide a rare glimpse into the concerns of ancient rulers: harvests, warfare, childbirth. Chinese civilization would develop its own distinctive philosophy and political traditions, later shaped by thinkers like Confucius and Lao Tzu. Meanwhile, around the Mediterranean, new powers rose. The Minoans on Crete built elaborate palaces at Knossos, adorned with vibrant frescoes. They were seafarers and traders, possibly inspiring later Greek myths about King Minos and the Minotaur. On mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans constructed fortified citadels and waged wars that may have inspired Homer's Iliad. The Bronze Age world was interconnected through trade in tin and copper, the essential ingredients for bronze. But around 1200 BCE, this interconnected world collapsed in a wave of destruction that historians still debate. Invasions, internal rebellions, climate shifts, perhaps all played a role. From the ashes of the Bronze Age, new cultures emerged. In the Levant, the Phoenicians became master sailors and traders, spreading an alphabet that would influence Greek and Latin scripts. In Israel and Judah, religious traditions evolved that emphasized a covenant with a single transcendent God. In Greece, city-states like Athens and Sparta developed contrasting systems of governance, democracy and militaristic oligarchy that would clash in the Peloponnesian War. By the 6th century BCE, the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great stretched from India to the Mediterranean. Unlike many conquerors, Cyrus allowed a degree of cultural and religious autonomy, earning him praise in both ancient inscriptions and the Hebrew Bible. His successors built administrative systems and road networks that facilitated trade and communication across vast distances. Then came a young Macedonian king named Alexander. In 334 BCE, Alexander the Great launched a campaign against Persia. Within a decade, he had conquered an empire stretching to Egypt and into India.
Though he died at 32, his conquests spread Greek language and culture across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East in a period known as the Hellenistic Age. Cities like Alexandria became centers of learning, housing vast libraries and attracting scholars who studied mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. To the west, Rome was rising. What began as a small city on the Tiber grew into a republic that prized civic duty and military discipline. The Roman Republic expanded through conquests and alliances, eventually dominating the Mediterranean. Yet internal tensions between rich and poor, generals and senators, destabilized the system. Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE marked the end of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus. At its height, the Roman Empire connected Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East through roads, aqueducts, and trade networks. Roman law, engineering, and language left a lasting imprint. Yet even Rome was not eternal. Economic strain, political instability, and external pressures contributed to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE. Ancient history is not just a sequence of empires rising and falling. It is the story of ordinary people, farmers tending fields along the Nile, scribes hunched over clay tablets in Babylon, soldiers marching under Roman standards, merchants sailing Phoenician ships. It is the story of ideas, writing, law, monotheism, democracy, empire. It is the story of how humans learn to organize themselves in ever more complex ways, sometimes achieving astonishing beauty and innovation, sometimes unleashing violence and oppression. What makes ancient history endlessly fascinating is not simply its distance from us, but its familiarity. The questions that haunted Gilgamesh about mortality and meaning still haunt us. The political debates in the Roman Senate echo in modern legislatures. The engineering feats of the pyramids and aqueducts inspire awe in an age of skyscrapers and space travel. As we look back across thousands of years, we see not a primitive world, but a foundation. Ancient civilizations experimented with forms of government, religion, art, and technology that continue to shape our lives. They were flawed, brilliant, contradictory, and profoundly human. And it all began on the banks of a river, with a handful of people who dared to settle down, plant seeds, and build something that would last. If this journey through history sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Tell us which explorer or historical figure you want to uncover next, because the past is packed with bold risks, untold stories, and forgotten paths that quietly reshaped the world we live in today.